I believe everyone has a story to tell. Through seeking true, authentic insights about the entrepreneurial journey, I provide a platform for our peers to share their stories and inspire those that listen. This is the County Business Talks podcast, produced by H2 Productions. Welcome to another episode of the County Business Talks podcast. This week's special guest is someone that has been in the motor trade and Sussex business community for nearly 3 decades. I'm delighted to welcome the CEO of Rivervale Leasing, Vince Pemberton. Vince, how you doing?
I'm very well, Sam. I'm very well. Can I correct you though?
You can.
Because it's actually Rivervale Cars Limited.
Cars Limited, mate. There we go.
Now, there's a lot more to it than just leasing.
Of course, mate.
But it's great to be here. Great to be here.
You know what? Absolutely buzzing to have you on. I know. Look, we've known each other for quite a few years, and often out having a bit of a chat and stuff. And we've sort of said that we're gonna do this. So, mate, it's great to have you on. Thanks for
inviting me.
Mate,
I was flattered that you invited me, Sam.
Oh, mate, this is going to be gold. Let's jump in. Listen, I've been obviously getting to know people's stories and stuff, but I want to know. Talk to me a little bit about life growing up and sort of, I guess, something about your early years has shaped who you are today.
Well, I grew up in West London. I was born in Hillingdon Hospital. Both my parents still around today, thankfully. Yeah. They were quite young. Mum was 17, Dad was 19. So I guess that had challenges in its own right. Yeah. I've got a sister that's younger than me, not a lot younger than me, and then a brother that's quite some way younger than me. But in the early days, it was just myself and my sister. So we was always sort of squabbling and fighting for the attention or whatever. She used to love a dance in front of Top of the Pops on a Thursday night at 7:30. Dad was always a wheeler dealer. Dad was always been dealing in cars and vans and trucks even, I think, at one point. And I think that's in our blood. That goes back to, I think I may have said to you before, that my great-granddad was selling American cars to gangsters in London in the 20s, importing them in Buicks and Cadillacs, near Tottenham Court Road, that sort of area. So, that sort of shaped me a little bit. I couldn't get away from motor cars or anything with wheels on it. As a young age, it was Scout Electrics. Boys of our generation love Scout Electrics. Dad and I used to sit there. At the time, custom cars were big. In the 70s, it was custom cars. I don't know if you remember the custom car magazines. Yeah. So Dad and I used to sit there, which is, now I think back, it was so wrong that we used to get a Scout Electric car like a Mercedes SL or whatever, and then we would cut bits out of it to put bigger, wider wheels on it on the Scout Electric track and play around with it. And I guess I was obsessed with cars and football, really. But having a really strong knitted family. My family originally come from the East End of London. And no one messed with my nan, 4'11". No one messed with her. And I was brought up in this culture to work hard, but never take anything for granted. And I still live by that today.
Yeah, mate, that's great. I think 100% similar. Obviously, I grew up in Dagenham, so it's similar type of thing, that type of culture. And one thing I definitely was given to me by my mum and dad was that strong work ethic and going, you go out, work hard and be a good person, and the rest take care of itself.
Yeah, I got my first job when I was 13 and a half. I can remember the day because my first day was when my youngest brother was born on the first day that I worked. So Dad took Mum off to hospital. I got up and went to work on my first day. And that was working in a butcher's shop.
Oh, really?
And that taught me at a very young age that if you go to work, it isn't just to have a bit of fun. You've got to go and work. But you can have fun along the way, and you can't really lose sight of that. Yeah. But great times.
So for you, there was never. Was that all? You was always going to go into the motor trade? Was that always the route for you? Do you think? No,
not really. I loved cars with a passion. I'm still big into my my fast Fords now and my Ford Caprice. Who doesn't love a Ford Caprice? And when you
I see a post that you put on LinkedIn a while about that.
Yeah, really popular post.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, about a Ford Capri.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love them? But I loved them from the outside looking in, not really thinking that I'd be necessarily working with them.
Right.
Even though Dad had, and obviously that had been through the generations.
Yeah, yeah.
I suppose I always felt that I was going to be a footballer. I'm passionate about my football.
Yeah.
Even going to school was to go there to meet up with my mates, not really to learn.
Yeah,
And
sure.
to get there, you know, we used to get there at 7:45 and play football before the school day started. Everything was a passion to play football. It led to everywhere.
Yeah.
So I guess I always thought, like a lot of kids do, that I'm going to end up being a professional footballer. It's at the point that you realise you don't have the skill set to become a professional footballer. But, you know, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I wouldn't say I was necessarily the class clown. I liked to make people laugh. I liked to make people smile. And that probably got me into a bit of trouble along the way. Could I have done better at school? Yeah. You know, could I have worked harder? Yeah. Would it have made a massive difference to my life? Who knows? Who knows? But I look back on it now with quite fond memories that, you know, I recall sitting in the class, and I went to an all-boys school next to an all-girls school. So I'm sitting in the class, and it's the day when they're talking about your careers, and the careers officer stood up and pointed me out and said, "You'll never get a job. No one will ever employ you. You won't make anything of yourself." And I suppose in that way, he sort of set me a bit of a challenge, really. Although I didn't go out of my way and go, "Right, I'm going to prove you wrong." It was always hanging there in the background that someone thought that little of me. I'm a people's person. I get on with people. You know, where does that mean I'm doomed? Does that mean I'm never going to get a job? You know, so
See,
when
for me, like, I listen to stories, and people have heard me talk on here a lot about the education system and whatnot, and very similar to you. Like, I listen to you talk about that, and that could me going to school pretty much because football was my life.
Yeah.
Same as you, wanted to become a professional footballer, and that's all it's about. But I I wasn't the most academic. No. And there was no, you know, like you said, I definitely wasn't. I don't think the class clown, but I always got on with people. But that's
Exactly.
we don't get a GCSE in building relationships, but actually, that life skill can relate to any business, to any job, anything in life. If you can have a chat and get on with people, what a great skill set to be able to have.
Mate, you're exactly right. You know, it should actually, and you're brilliant, and other people that we're close friends with, like, you know, Dodging people, who's a master at it.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
There should be a qualification in networking.
Yeah.
You know, when you can go out and meet people and just chat and work out, you know, various different angles and relationships. You know, but it was never considered like that, was it? You know, you left there. I can't think of too many of my mates that went to university, if any. It was a different game to get to university then, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, the priority was that you left school and you went out and got a job. You know, so when I left school, I was sort of bumbling about a little bit. I went to work for Ryman's, the stationers, for a bit in a warehouse. Loved that. There was a group of guys in there that you got on well with, so you went to work, and it was a bit like going to school, that you went there, had to work a bit and met some mates and enjoyed it. And then things started to click a little, but not a lot. And then my parents had moved down to Littlehampton, and I was coming backwards and forwards, and Dad had taken a used car site. And I recall it was November 1987. He went, "Look, you're coming down. Why don't you come down? Come and work with me. Come and start off by doing some valeting and bits and pieces." So that's what I did. I packed everything up in London. Most of the family had moved away. My grandparents had moved down. My parents had moved down. Obviously, with my younger brother, he wasn't old enough to make any decisions for himself at that point. My sister was going off to get married to a chap in the RAF, so she was moving away. So I thought I'll do it. So November 1987, I moved down to Littlehampton, stayed with Mum and Dad, and started to get into the motor trade. More so, always having a bit of a passion, it's quite easily to switch. Started off by cleaning them and then progressing to selling them. And but it got to a point I can remember that it was sat there in Dad's office. Dad was paying me. There was cars outside covered in snow. Nobody came on the site. Nobody's going to come and look at a car. And this went on for quite a while. I think that would have probably been back end of '89 or something like that, something in that region. So you've got to get out there, scrape the snow off, and open the door will open where it's frozen to show somebody a car. Nobody really does it. And I felt really that I needed to make a change. I didn't like the fact that I was sat there. There was nothing really to do. And I was Dad was paying me. And he never queried about paying me. I don't want to give him that impression. It was never like that. And then I saw an advert in what would have been one of the local papers at the time, and it was saying about selling office equipment. Now, because I'd done that little stint early on working for Ryman's, the stationers, I thought, it's one of their sales rep type roles. So I applied for the job, went for an interview in Crawley, got given the job, and then realised it was actually selling photocopiers. And not only was it selling photocopiers, it was selling photocopiers for one of the most notorious people in the industry, which at the time were signing people up. I'll never forget, the agreements were 108 months. I'm still connected with a couple of people on LinkedIn that actually work there. But the agreements were 108 months. The machines weren't going to last 108 months, Sam, but people still were signed up to these agreements. I was really naive with it. You signed up. The best bit about it was a guy called Paul Fitzgerald, and I've tried to track him down. So if anybody knows where he is, please let us know. This guy called Paul Fitzgerald. The best bit about it was that they put you on a 2-month training programme. So you had to be in Crawley every morning in a classroom session from 7 o'clock till lunchtime. They did all sorts of types of role play, learning how to prepare quotes, telephone conversations, booking appointments, you name it, they taught you it all. Up until lunchtime. And then in the afternoon, you'd go out in your Vauxhall Astra estate that they gave you as your company car, and you would travel around, and you had to go where any business was. So it could be a brass plate on a high street, or it could be on an industrial estate or an office block. And you had to go in there, go to the reception. Your aim was to get a compliment slip. That was first point. Then you needed to get the decision maker's details and contact information, and as much information as you could get out of the receptionist or whoever spoke to you. Your target was to accumulate 2,000 compliment slips over the 8 weeks in a box file. Now, I still have that box file in my loft full of these compliment slips.
No way.
And they used to stamp them in to count that you'd got them. And then as the training developed, you started taking lumps of these compliment slips out, and that would be, right, now ring that person. You've been there. Now ring them, book an appointment. Now, for those people that have never just picked a cold call or picked a phone up to make a cold call, they don't know how intimidating and how stressful it can actually be on people. You are shaking from the inside when you actually dial the number. You're now going to interrupt somebody's day.
Because it's mad, isn't it? Like, just to interrupt, like, there's, as much as we are very much, like you said, you're a people person, build relationships, have a chat with people, no problem. People always say to me, "Oh, you gifted a gab," and that type of. But for me, cold calling, absolutely, like,
it's hard work.
Hard work. Different, like, a different type of mindset, and it's a tough gig.
To make it even worse, I can remember on this particular occasion there was 6 of us left out of the original recruitment intake. And I kid you not, they had a desk a bit similar to this at Rat Round the other side. It's a bit like the Bridge of the Enterprise, really, how this was laid out. And you'd have the sales director, the managing director and everything. And then you was round this side with these other people that were with you, that are in the training. And you're now going to demonstrate to the directors in the business how far you've come. So they put a whiteboard behind you with your initials and with everyone else's initials there, and they put a telephone handset, and it had a retractable cord, and they sellotaped the handset to your hand, and then you had to start phoning out of these compliment slips. And the aim was that you had to get an appointment. the pressure is on you. So you can imagine the conversation you're having, and all this training that they've taught you about handling objections, beneficial opening statement, and all these other things that cold calling comes with it. And then if you've got an appointment, you weren't allowed to sit down, because there's the thing about being on the telephone and your diaphragm being open and how that comes across better. You weren't allowed to sit down, but when you got your appointment, you had to with the cord over, mark against your name, and then back. Wow. That is pressure. I'm telling you, that is pressure. And I'd got to the point. I'd said to my other half, who then became my wife, I'm not sure I can continue to do this. I was doing okay. I was selling photocopiers. I was doing what they'd asked me to do, but did I like the job? No way. That is a tough gig. So I kept looking in the newspaper, and then I saw an advert in the Evening Argus. Evans Halshaw had the Vauxhall dealer on Old Shoreham Road at the time, where the garden centre is now. And they wanted a fleet sales executive. And I thought, that's me. I know cars. I've worked in the motor industry working with Dad. But I've got something a little bit different now when I've had this training. And how could I take that into that industry? So I went for the interview. It got narrowed down to me and one other guy, and the other guy got the job. And I was gutted. And the guy that I would be reporting to, who was one of my most inspirational people in my working career, let alone my life, really, and the way that he looked at things, he said, "Vince, I'm really sorry. It's gone to the general manager, and the general manager has picked this other fella over you." He said, "But please keep in touch, because I don't have the confidence that this fella's going to get anywhere." And then it went 5 months down the road, and this fella John called me, and he said, "Vince, are you still interested?" And I went, "Yeah, am I? More than ever." He said, "I think that guy's hit the end of the road. He'd done 10,000 miles in and I can't even remember the car sound, how sad. An Astra 1.7 LS turbo diesel. He'd done 10,000 miles in it, and he had the later model with the driver's airbag. It was like, whoa, what a car.
Yeah.
Forget the rest of the passengers, as long as the driver was all right. He'd run up a big mobile phone bill and hadn't sold one car.
Wow.
So they said, if you were interested, come back in. So they parted company with this fella, and I went down there, and they gave me the job. Then all the bits that I didn't like about the office equipment world, and I've got to take my hat off to those guys. I'm not dissing the job.
Yeah,
you've just got to be a bit of a unique.
It's a completely you're right. It's a different breed. Like cold calling is one skill set, and you've got to be a certain type of person to be able to definitely do it and enjoy it, I guess. Like,
but I took that. I took my box of compliment slips, and I sat there with a telephone, and I agreed with this guy John Jeffries. What a character! That I would ring 10 of these people every day out of this box and handle other inquiries and whatever. So agree that we start. I go in the first day. John had already booked a holiday to the Caribbean, bless him. So I go in there first day, sell a car first day. Brilliant. And I just never looked back. They gave me a target. I didn't quite hit the target in year one, but he said, "You've done fantastic. You're off again year two." Then started to smash the targets.
Do you think, like, just from a sales perspective, so it'd be interesting to get if you're selling something that you're really passionate about, like with motor car company, similar techniques to selling both things, but ultimately you're passionate about this one. Is that an easier sale? Easier to get that sale across the line, easier to make that cold call, easier to speak to people about because you believe in that more than that?
Do you know, that's a funny one, because I know that some of the other directors in my business will rib me for this when they play this back. But I don't believe I've ever sold anything to anybody. I've helped people buy what they want. That's how I've always. That's how I've looked at it. When people are buying, there's a big difference. If you're buying a car to an office, a printer, photocopier, whatever, you're not really that excited about it. Yeah. But when you're buying a car, it's such an emotive decision and process. Yeah. You know, people have done the research. They've had in those days it would have been the brochures. They've had the brochures out, haven't they? They've read all the specification. They knew more about the car than arguably you did.
Yeah.
So all you did really was help them to buy what they wanted. You know, there's I've got a great contact. I guess he won't mind me putting his name on here. A local lad, Paul Goldsmith. I don't know whether you know Paul. He was at IT First in the very beginning.
Yeah.
In the days of the Brighton and Hove Albion, in their dark days, he was putting money on the front of the shirt in sponsorship, etc. He was passionate about it, but that guy was so passionate, and he's still passionate about cars. He knows what he wants. All you've got to do is help him get it.
Yeah.
So you don't sell it to him, and he knows he doesn't want to be sold to.
Yeah.
He just wants you with your expertise to help him get what he wants to get.
Yeah.
So I guess there's some similarities in the fact that you've got to be a people's person to start with.
Yeah.
People deal with who they like and get on with, don't they?
Yeah. No, like and trust, isn't it? And you build that relationship on that basis. But I was just keen, I guess, from your point of view, like, you know, you've gone into something now that actually I'm selling this thing, or helping someone to buy something that you love as well and you're passionate about, because you can tell, like, every time I spoke to you, and like I said, even in posts on LinkedIn, you can, that passion for cars, and you love. You love it.
It's a strange. I love helping people get what they want. I get as much of a kick out of that, really.
Yeah, sure.
That someone goes away happy and they think that you've done a great job or the business has done a great job.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so proud of what our guys achieve on their Trustpilot reviews.
Yeah.
You know, when you consider what's gone on in the industry with, you know, we used to deal and deliver a Ford Fiesta within 14 days. And now, because of semiconductor chips or whatever other bits and pieces that have affected production, we've had people waiting 14 months for a Ford Fiesta rather than 14 days. Wow. In that travel, in that time, you've had people complain because they haven't got what they want. We live in a world, I think we're changing our view a little bit, but we live in a world that we thought, well, I see it, I can have it.
You look at Amazon,
it's exactly that.
Next day,
it's all about that, isn't it? You know, so that whole customer service experience about making sure that you get people what they want and you help them along the way. You put your arm around them. John Jeffries always used to say that you know, put your arm around them, help them along the way, and that's really what you're doing. You know, when that started to change, I suppose, a little bit again for me, where you get a little bit re-energised with it, was that when I was sat in Evans House Vauxhall, and the business had made some really strange commercial decisions. Had been bought out by a bigger group. John Jeffries, who was my foil, really, you know, he helped me so much that he kept everything out of my way for me to just get on and do what I did. Amazing man management, really. Some of the phrases and that he used to come out with, it was just brilliant. Working with you, Vince, I don't know whether I'm on foot or horseback. And I still use these today, Sam. I use them every day. I don't know whether I'm Arthur or Martha. He was just brilliant with it. And I loved that sort of, how that guy knew how to manage me and get the best out of me, my strengths. And he was made redundant, and I sort of struggled a bit then. And then out of the blue, I get a phone call from Rivervale, which in those days, the Rivervale was the Mercedes-Benz dealer, and you had across the road was Chandler's being the BMW dealer. Well, they were around the corner at the time. But they were your two elite motor trade businesses in and around. I'd even go as far as say Sussex, really. You know, Rivervale had Rivervale Porsche, Rivervale Mercedes, both in Brighton, in Reading. You know, they were not just a local brand; they were known a bit further afield. So when I get a phone call to say we're looking for a corporate sales manager, you know, would you be interested? First off, I thought it was a wind-up. I thought, why am I going to get a phone call from Rivervale? This is a wind-up. I've got some friends that have done occasional wind-ups like that, Sam, and I thought this was just another one, and you was on your toes. And so I went round, met with them. They staggered me by the target they gave me initially, and it wasn't because it was too high. You know, I was at that point, I was shifting around 1,200 Vauxhalls a year, which was quite a number.
Wow. And
then I sat with the guy who managing director, who's sadly no longer around. But I said to him, okay, that's great, all the package fits, but what's my target? And the first thing he said to me was, "You've got to do better than the last bloke." That was what he said to me. Well, how well did the last bloke do? That's what you never want to know, isn't it? And I said, "Well, how many have I got to do?" And he went, 40. And I went, 40 a month, thinking, can I get Mercedes into wherever I need to, business-wise?
Yeah.
40 a month. And he went, no, a year. So it was quite a reality check from me that was all that they really wanted.
Yeah.
And it was so I agreed to take the job. They'd increased my basic salary. They'd given me a brand new Mercedes C200 Elegance, as it was at the time.
Nice.
Laptop, mobile phone. These are all the perks. You didn't really get those. You know, "Oh, look at this, I've arrived." And they gave me a company credit card, a Rivervale company credit card on day one, and they said, "Go and make friends for Rivervale." So if I've now not fallen into the job that probably suits me, I don't know what would. So I get my car on a Friday night. I'm not due to finish until the Monday morning, but they've given it to me early, so I've got it over the weekend. And I drove home. I put it on the drive. We was living in a semi-detached house in Durrington at the time, and I drive onto the drive, and there's one of the neighbours a little bit further up with his young lad, and they've been out playing football in the street. And I love football in the street, probably like you love a bit of football in the street. I'll play football in the street tomorrow. I love it. And I've got out the car, and the young lad's walking past with his dad, and I heard the young lad say, "Look at that, Dad. He must have won the lottery." As I put this brand new Mercedes on the driveway, and I've gone in, and it really
wow.
That lad doesn't know what he did. It sort of re-energised me, as if to say, "Wow, is that what people think? Is that what people think of the brand?" In some sense, I'd become a car was a car, and it was a box that you were shifting, and all of a sudden, this was a little bit different. People were buying into Mercedes products.
It's like a status symbol almost.
Very much then. At that time, that was 96, 97. At that time, Mercedes were starting to make their way onto managers' lists. So if he was a mid-manager that might have been lucky enough to have, a Mondeo or a Gear or a Cavalier SRI, all of a sudden on your list, you could have a C-Class Mercedes. And if you could do it, company car tax rules weren't so offensive then. People would do it. So it was like I was in the right place at the right time. And with previous connections, I hit the ground running. One order did my year's target. So I hit the ground running, and I loved working for Rivervale. It was a great job.
That's interesting. I want to touch on there about you mentioned about the connections, and you've shared a couple of stories with me offline. I was at an event where you was having a chat with Tony Cascarino, and we done the Best of British thing, and over the years, some of those connections that you've built, Bradley Walsh, I guess people like that, and how has all that sort of come about just by you being out and about and meeting them people too?
Rivervale lost the Mercedes dealer in December 2000. It was a massive shock to the system. It was not their own doing. They didn't deserve to lose the franchise for the area. Mercedes had a reshuffle where Mercedes themselves wanted all the dealerships inside the M25. So the way they were going to get all those dealerships inside the M25 was to give a huge sweetener to the businesses that were in the M25 and give them an area outside of the M25. So Sussex got given to H.R. Owen, and Tommy Sopwith, who's another, we'll probably touch on him a bit later. What a character, most charismatic man I've ever met. Quickly followed by your good self, but he was the most charismatic man, Sam. Unreal. So December 2000, this announcement got made and a shudder went through the business, and I thought, I don't want to work for a PLC again. I'd had that experience when my latter days of working at Vauxhall, and I just didn't know where I was going to go again. I was at another juncture, which what was going to open up next, and a guy came in from Lombard North Central, or Lombard Vehicle Management, or whatever it was called. Let's just sit and have a chat with him, and he said, "What are you going to do now then, Vince?" I said, I don't know. I love this job. This is the best job I've ever had. But I like a business that relates to you as a person rather than a number on a payroll sheet. And he said, why don't you go working for yourself? And he said, you can have the Lombard system. I'll sign you up to the Lombard system. Therefore, you don't just have to supply Mercedes anymore. You can supply Mercedes and anything else on our system. And so it sounded quite appealing. So I said to him, well, what have I got to have that? And he said, you've got to have a consumer credit licence, which when you look at FCA registration and stuff today, Sam, of how rigorous FCA registration is, in those days, as long as you had a clean credit history, you could get a consumer credit licence for 35 quid. And that was it, you were done. Wow. Consumer credit licence and a VAT number, of which I had neither. So that weekend, I'm sitting with Dad, and Dad asked the same question, what are you going to do? I've been offered this. He said, why aren't you going to do it then? I said, well, I don't have a consumer credit licence or a VAT number. And he said, well, I've got both of them. And he said Dad was doing what we call trading. So he was trading, buying cars from one dealer and selling it to another and all this sort of stuff. And he said, why don't we get a little office and you can do what you do best, one side of the office, and I'll do what I do best, the other side of the office. So in May 2001, that's what we did. We set up this little business called Eagle Oak Vehicle Contracts. I reluctantly left Rivervale. It was the best job I'd had. And then going out on the big wide world. Now that is another challenge when you eat what you kill, really. You know, in that world, you've got to write business. If you don't write business, you've got no money coming in. You want nothing. Again, we hit the ground running with it. And on this, I'm getting to this, Sam. Probably stay with me. So I'm sat there. We had the little office opposite the Thomas & Becket in Worthing. Lovely little office. Yeah. And I get a phone call from the guy who used to be my previous boss, who'd given me the job at Rivervale. He was a big Charlton Athletic fan, and he says to me, "There's a guy at Charlton wants to speak about cars, but they're not Mercedes, so we can't really do anything. Do you want to go and have a chat with him on the understanding that if he wants Mercedes, you'll get them from us?" Of course I will. So I go and I drive up to the Valley. I meet a guy called Jason Morgan, who's gone on to be an MBE, who looks after their Charlton Athletic Community Trust. Yeah. Again, amazing individual and character. Yeah. Just energy is unreal. And a guy called Mick Everett, who at the time was the operations director. And I sit there in the Valley in like a little meeting room with them, and I explain what I can do for them. They're talking about supplying vehicles just to the community trust. Half a dozen vehicles, I think it was. So I explained to them what we can do. And Mick Everett doesn't say a word. And for those people who know Mick Everett, they'll understand what I mean. And Mick Everett doesn't say a word. And he looks at you and he sort of growls at you a bit, really, in a way, even though he is the loveliest fella and he's a really good friend of mine and I love him dearly. I didn't know at that point that he didn't bite. And he sort of growls at you a bit in a way, and you do what you do and you shake their hands and you go out the door thinking, well, let's see what happens. And then I get on the A2 driving back and the phone rings in your car, and in those days your phone was in a cradle. Didn't really have caller display, just the numbers come up, so I answered it. And Vince, Mick Everett. I'm thinking I must have left something at the Valley. What you've just offered to Jason, can you do for the rest of the club? And I think, actually, Mick, I can, and I can probably make it, this world is a volume world, so if there's more volume, I can probably make it better for everybody involved. You better turn around then. Back to the Valley, and we do this thing. And Charlton Athletic order 35, 40 vehicles or whatever it was back then, and we supply them all to them. We have an arrangement of getting a box so many times a year and that. And then you start meeting people within Charlton, like you had to sort Alan Kirbishley's car out, you had to sort Mervyn Day's car out, which you do, and that connects you with other people. And then Alan Kirbishley's, one of his assistant managers was a guy called Roy Peacock. No, not Roy Peacock. God, that's awful, and I can't remember his name. I'll have to find that in a minute for you. But God, that's really got me. But his son was Gavin Peacock, who was
of course.
So he put me in touch with Gavin Peacock. Gavin Peacock, who at the time was an ex-Chelsea player, with Cascarino, who was an ex-Chelsea player. Gavin picks Cascarino up, go off to an event at Chelsea. And Cass says, "Where'd you get this car from?" So Gavin tells him where he gets the car from. So you start talking to Cascarino. Alan Kirbishley leaves Charlton. Alan Pardew goes in at Charlton. Vince, will you go and sort Alan Pardew's car out? Go and sort Alan Pardew's car out. That then revolves to Alan Pardew's manager, a guy called Barry Neville. Barry Neville introduces you to Teddy Sheringham. Teddy Sheringham says, "Why should I deal with you?" Now, I knew that Cass and Ted had played together at Millwall.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, you know, I can't answer that, but maybe you should ask Cass." "What, you deal with Cass?" Yeah, I look after Cass. So they speak, and then you start doing that, and it just revolves. And Barry Neville was quite a big part of that. That Barry then rings you and says, "Bradley's looking for a car. He wants to do a bit of a deal with you, but Bradley's looking for a car," and that's what we did. And we've had a relationship with Bradley Walsh ever since. And it's connections, people within people. It's
Mate, you know what? I love listening to stories like that. Like for me, like we've got our county business clubs thing up there, and it says one of our main things that come out of people by people. No matter what you're doing, I'm such a strong believer in that. And if you're a good person and you do things in the right way, and you're able to build those relationships as you do, that's what it's about, isn't it? And that's how those, like you said, there's always going to be that then referral and that. That's the man you deal with. Go and speak to Vince. But
they're no different, Sam. They want something, and they want someone to help them get it.
Yeah.
I suppose the bit is that they're probably, the higher profile they are, they're a little bit more wary and a little bit untrusting to start with until they get to know you.
Yeah.
You know, and I've had some fantastic experiences with those guys, and even to the point of my youngest daughter, who works with us at the minute, ended up really bizarrely in Teddy Sheringham's lounge singing to his family on a Saturday morning. How does that ever happen? But you know, he was absolutely brilliant with her. I'm so privileged to have those sort of relationships and still keep them. And you know,
but even like you say, I guess that even from that first point of call, that first telephone call from Charles, but even one step back, having a referral from the Mercedes dealer to trust you to go, Vince, you look after this. I know that if it's going to be a Mercedes, you'll put it through us, and have no trust. That element, not just by building that relationship, that comes round, and it's all. That's why, again, the belief that everything's that full circle. That as long as you treat people well and you're a good person,
100%,
you're always going to be looked at or looked upon and referred.
It comes back and it pays dividends, doesn't it?
Yeah, mate, massive.
You know, so little old Eagle Oak expands with a few more people, and we get to 2008, and then a conversation starts up with me and Neil Chapman, who's now the current Rivervale chairman. He was the finance director at the time. You cannot believe how hard this fella works in the business, especially on stuff that we've been working on recently. He's coming up to 68 in May. He won't mind me saying, and he should be slowing down, but he's like got another gear. It's unbelievable. We started talking about if we were ever going to sell Eagle Oak vehicle contracts, and I felt at the time it needed to get bolted to a bigger ship. It needed to develop and expand, really. Got into a conversation, and it was agreed that Rivervale would buy Eagle Oak vehicle contracts as long as the key members of staff went back with it. And to me, Rivervale at that point had moved away from its Mercedes franchise. It was trying to re-establish itself in Mazda and a few bits and pieces. You know, it was a tough time in those days. You know, Neil Chapman would say that Rivervale had become a little bit of a ragbag of businesses. So it had gone from this elite business to this bit of a ragbag of businesses. So we agreed it all, and January 2009, 4 of us went back to I went back. The other guys hadn't previously worked with Rivervale, but we became part of the under the Rivervale umbrella again. And that just, everything started to roll from there. And that was the financial crisis had hit.
I was going to say 2000.
But each year the business just grew and grew and grew, and we added more and more and more. And then at the end of it, you know, Rivervale looked at it and said, "Why are we working with these franchise operations and bits when we can clearly invest in Rivervale, which in those points was the leasing division really, and Jeff Naylord selling used cars pretty much out of a car park really. And we'd gone to Tommy Sopwith with a plan. He said, if you hit that number, we'll put you a new building up. Trying to get planning permission for a new building in motor trade building in Brighton, as you can imagine how difficult that can be.
Yeah, I bet.
But we got it approved in, just trying to think of my times now, we got it approved in 15. January 2016, they started to build on what was the old Hosenden and Besson site that had been burnt down, which is where the building currently is now. By the end of October, November, we was in this brand new building. So all of a sudden, we'd gone from having the leasing team, the used car operation had a proper place to work from, and now we've got after sales in the building, the service department. Only 2 guys at that time was downstairs working on the ramps. 2000, and that grew and progressed, and then a crazy idea came to mind one day to say we need to add minibuses. So we added the minibus division in 2018. That with 1 person, that's now up to 5 people. Wow. And we're one of the market leaders in supplying minibuses into schools and private sector, state schools, charities, sports organisations around the country. 2019, we wanted to add fleet and fleet management, which a lot of people talk about fleet management. They don't necessarily understand how involved fleet management and what you get in it. You know, and it with all the laws around corporate manslaughter and all those type of things. You've got to make sure that if people are in vehicles, they're safe. In the vehicle, and not only have they got to be safe in the vehicle, the people have got to be in the right state of mind to be driving those vehicles. So it's a big area. That has also grown. That's doing really well. And then we added the Maxus electric van franchise, ironically, during COVID. So the business now, when you look at it, like when we first started this conversation, people think it's Rivervale Leasing, but there's actually 6 legs to the stool now, and works in. But where it's gone from being a rag bag of businesses that perhaps didn't all connect and click, these all connect and click. And we're really proud of what we put together and the people in it.
I just wanted to say something about one of our sponsors, Plus X. I've been a member for over 2 years now, and the podcast studio here is the home to the County Business Talks podcast. Brighton is the perfect location to create, build and grow a business, with role models and inspiration at every turn. It's no wonder that this has become a hotbed of innovation and entrepreneurialism. So if you're building your future here on the South Coast, there's no better place than Plus X Brighton. 7 stories of cutting-edge space, expertly designed to support all kinds of business, from newly started freelancers to large established corporates. With flexible, dynamic environment, ranging from co-working desks to private studios, their specialist facilities include a state-of-the-art prototyping workshop and media suites. They also maintain a community-focused event schedule and offer all kinds of business support programs. Built for anyone who wants to make a change, Plus X has everything you need. Find out more at www.plusx.space. Okay, back to the episode. That's an amazing journey. Look, I'm keen to know look, that conversation with your dad, like 2008, and around that. What's his take on all of this and where you are now and what you've achieved with Rivervale? And
well, Dad always keeps my feet firmly on the ground. I think I may have said to you before, you know, some people look at it and consider you to be entrepreneurial, whatever the definition of an entrepreneur is. And for me, it's what can I come up with next, what can I create, what can I bolt on, what will improve our business model.
Innovate, and more entrepreneurs innovate, don't we? As I guess that's one of the things,
But Dad at that point wanted to slow it down a little bit anyway, so it sort of made perfect sense. Dad had helped us get along the way, and then Dad went back to doing what he did before. Suffered with a couple of health issues since, but that doesn't stop Dad. Dad still knows how to make a pound into £2. And I often joke with him that if you dropped a tenner, he'd manage to catch it before it hits the floor. Dad's very clever at those sort of things, and he does keep my feet firmly on the ground. And has taught me and continues to tell me that particularly in the motor trade, well, that's how it affects us, that you never take anything for granted. You've always got to look down the track at what's coming. that can create challenges, but it also creates opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think he's really pleased with how the business has gone on and grown. That he helped us, start.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Couldn't have done it without him.
Yeah, I love it. And I guess then talk to me a little bit about that. You just mentioned obviously the Max's group within like lockdown. You sort of grew that part of the business to it. So how challenging was lockdown for you guys, or in general? Or
God, it was a mental time, wasn't it? I know you've had Andy the Tugwell brothers on, and they really helped me, and I hope some of the input I had gave them help them, and others on that call.
Mentioned it.
When Neil Chapman, who I mentioned earlier, he's like a bit Mystic Meg really, because we were sat there in the beginning of January. We'd just come back after the Christmas break, and coronavirus was starting to get headlines of what was going on in China and how it was going into Europe. And he went, "This is going to be a big problem, And none of us really took it. We've had bird flu and other things that have come over, and they seem to have come a little bit and then gone, haven't they? Nothing's ever affected us quite like what COVID did. But he called it. He said, "This is going to be a problem." And then we're working our way through it. It's obviously getting closer and closer and closer. And then Boris on that night says, "We're going into lockdown." But if you remember rightly, and I feel for Boris a bit, I know some people, whether you love him or hate him or hate the Tories or whatever, but it was the unknown to everybody.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when he's called it, and he said, "We expect this to be for 12 weeks," and so got off that. Finished watching it on TV. Got on a call with Neil. What do we do now? And our first thing was to make sure we've got enough cash flow around us that you can make sure you can pay your staff. And when in those days we had about 55 members of staff, so it's a good 6-figure number every month that you're just going to pay out in salaries. Have we got enough money in the bank to make sure that we can pay everybody and everything and still be around in 12 weeks' time, when all of a sudden we'll pull the curtains and COVID will have gone? And from that point on, it progressed. Obviously, it was a huge challenge. You're getting everybody on a Teams call. When you've got 55 members of staff on a Teams call, that becomes
it's like a challenge, isn't it?
It's like herding cats, that, isn't it? Unbelievable. But to be fair to them, they all took it on board. Then, of course, and I'm listening to some of your other podcasts when people mention furlough. None of us knew what furlough was. I think Andy Tugwell said he thought it was a horse racing term, didn't he? None of us knew what furlough was. But, that was amazing support for businesses in that period of time. Then we had the other dilemma that, right, who do we furlough? If you've got a strong team and a strong mentality, you're furloughing some people. As an example, so we went from 55 people and we furloughed about 65% of people. We had to furlough the guys in the workshops. They couldn't take their work home. They couldn't work from home on a driveway.
Of course not.
They had to be. But we then had regular meetings every day. Neil was spot on with cash management meetings to make sure every single day those 35% of people that stayed working worked so hard, Sam, every day. They put a shift in, incredible shift, and which they are all with us now, still working with us.
Amazing.
And they were just nothing short of amazing. I think what hit it home to me, really, of what we'd built in the way of a team of people and the type of people and the culture within the business was they started to open the workshops up again you could start to open the workshops up again in May. And you've had to say, right, we'll gradually open it because we don't know how many people are going to want their car serviced or their car MOT. There was extension rules around MOTs and all sorts. We've selected the guys that are going to come back into work. And then I've got other technicians that are ringing me, why can't I work? Why can't I work? They're being paid furloughed money at home in the sun, which, if you remember rightly,
it was a beautiful summer.
The people were. It was partying in the garden in April or whatever they were, weren't they? But I've got people in May. I've got technicians and people in the business, other people in the business saying, when can I get back to work? I want to get back to work. They weren't there for the ride, taking the money. They were like, I want to play a part.
Yeah.
And that is the culture of the business. The business is the people in the business. Yeah. The business isn't me, isn't Neil, isn't Simon and Duncan, the other shareholders. The business is that people in that business. Yeah. We just guide them and steer them, but they're the business.
And talk to me then about, because it fascinates me, the whole culture piece, and that's one of the reasons why I always want to talk about on every episode. But how has that, since, I guess, coming back on board in sort of 2008, that period, and over the last 15 years, talk to me about how that culture has developed, I guess, as you've grown as a company, and how because that's 55 staff's a lot of people to keep that strong culture and different. And I guess the different thing with you is there's so many different departments and so many different things going on, so many different moving parts. Yeah. I guess pardon the pun, but within that environment to keep everyone cohesive, and because like you mentioned earlier about it all clicks together now, like all the different elements of the business all click together. So how have you managed to achieve that then?
Well, I've got a brilliant management team. And if you can, if the culture starts with you at the top and you breed that down to the management team, and the management team are good, it will fountain down to everybody in the business. I think what we've always tried to say is that everybody in that business, me included, that the skill sets involved in this, don't get me wrong, because I'm not a trained technician, but I'd like to think that nobody in the business gets asked to do anything that either me or their line manager wouldn't do, for one. That we always understand that there's a customer at the end of the journey, and we have this big thing in our mission statement, which we're going through revamping, and it says that we will treat people like we will want to be treated. And that's not a difficult rule, actually, when you think about it. It's not rocket science that sentence come up. So we have this, if I get a member of staff comes to me and they've got a customer's complained about one thing or another, and we don't get a lot of complaints, we're really lucky like that. But if a member of staff comes to me with a customer's complaint, the first thing I'll ask is to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Does the customer have justification for the complaint? If you were that customer, would you be unhappy with what's happened? And if we have dropped the ball, or if we have slipped up, or we can understand where the customer's predicament is, we would just sort it. We would just sort it. And I think that breeds within the business, that the business knows that there's an air of confidence that we're doing everything for the right reasons, and we are moving the business forward in whatever direction that we go. And we can be, even though there's a lot of people, we can still be quite an agile business. That we're doing everything for the right reasons, therefore the culture, we're always on the same page, if that makes sense. And it's
so interesting to hear that. And as a strong leader, I guess, like you said, things have to filter from the top. And you set that example, and then it filters down. Your management team set another example, and then whoever comes into that business, then they see it at every single level. And I guess
absolutely.
Listening to some of talk about some of the challenges we obviously mentioned about COVID, but I guess now at this particular moment in time, with the way the industry is at the moment, like you're saying, people waiting 14 months, that's a completely new challenge to have to do, especially from a customer service point of view. Yeah. And I guess the staff, because of that culture, always trying to put yourself, what would the customer think of that? That's got to be a real tough period at the moment, I guess.
It goes back a little bit from that. Back in May 2019, Tommy Sopwith sadly passed away at 86. Unbelievable character, absolutely unbelievable. His view, and we still have it above the door if you come into the building, was do it the right way, do it the Rivervale way. That was based on what he did. You never went to him with a plan on the back of a fag packet. Right. And he would not do it. If you went to him with a plan, it had to be right. If you were going to do it, you do it properly. Hence why we got, I went to him with a plan of putting a building up of, he already owned the land, putting a building up of between 750 and £1 million. That building costs £3 million plus to put up after Tommy Sopwith had a look at the plans. If you're going to do it, you do it properly. And he was such an inspirational character. I don't know whether you know too much about him. So his father was Sir Thomas Sopwith, who designed and built the Sopwith Camel aeroplane from the First World War. Right. So this Tommy Sopwith was really an engineer that had a passion for cars and anything that went fast. At the age of 86, he had a CLS 63 AMG Mercedes that had 3 speed detection devices on it. It was incredible at 86. Sam, the guy was incredible, and sadly he passed away. And, the business had been owned by Endeavour, people that are Endeavour Holdings, people that are, been around in Brighton for a long time will remember Endeavour Ford. That was also one part of his businesses at one stage.
Yeah.
But Endeavour had become a property portfolio, a property company really, and the only motor trade business was Rivervale. And when Tommy Sopwith, who loved that business, that was his baby, was Rivervale. When he passed away, it went to a panel of trustees, and then after a while, it was like, well, this doesn't really fit in our portfolio, and we understood why. And then it was spoken about. Neil had conversations. It was spoken about. Well, would Rivervale be sold? And there was a few interested parties. That thankfully it never happened. But one of the guys on the board of trustees piped up and said, "Well, why don't we offer it to the management team? They know how to run Rivervale. They've been running Rivervale. Let's see if we can put it together." So this was going on for some time. Neil and I managed to get it over the line, or predominantly Neil. Over the line with him, myself, Simon Fuller, Duncan Stocks, took on the business by doing a management buyout in April 29 last year. Near enough the next day, the world's gone into a financial crisis. And you're thinking, what timing? Everything is in the timing. But, we've continued, we're still progressing, we're still developing.
But just touch on that, just jump in there. What does go through your mindset then at that point when you have just achieved that? You got to this point, you got management buyout. We're going to own this amazing company that we've built over these years, and then that does kick in. And you look at the phone. Where's your mindset at that point?
I could still hear Dad going, "Don't take anything for granted." I could still hear Dad in the background with it. It's an amazing honour to be the CEO of a company like Rivervale. People who live in around Brighton know Rivervale. Probably, we have this whole thing that 8 out of 10 cats think Rivervale's still the Mercedes dealer, which is incredible how strong Rivervale and the brand actually has been over the years. We're trying to say this is the new Rivervale now. Doesn't mean that we can't still supply you whatever you want to supply us. It's just different ways of doing things. But the more modern way really. All of a sudden you've got the salary bill to take on. As I said, it's a big seven-figure number each month to find. But for me, Sam, I've always got confidence in the brand and the people within the business. I think that's refer to it, talking about Alex Ferguson. He would say that people, part of his role was to let people know that the impossible was possible. Anything can be achieved. I get ridiculed a little bit internally for always wearing rose-tinted glasses, but I think you have to. So I've got confidence in that 6 legs of that business stall these days, that I know the people heading those departments up and the people working in that department go to work each day to give it their all and add some value. Because if people add value, they go home happier, don't they? Yeah. So it was a little bit nervy, but what do you do in that situation? Do you go, I don't think I'm up for this, when you've built it to the level that you have? So, but you look at what we've had to deal with. Sorry. So you've had Brexit. You've then had COVID. You've then had the war in Europe, Ukraine. You've then, in our industry, we've had the semiconductor shortages, which has meant there's been a big supply issues, and then we get a cost of living crisis. You put that all in a snow globe, it can't get a lot worse, can it? Really. Right. And I'm not even sure that the other ones have had the effect, and we're still now finding our feet out of Brexit. I'm not even sure what is happening with what. But I've got belief that if you're an agile business and you've got good people within the business, you can tweak and change, and you can, you don't want to cut your cloth accordingly. You don't want to lose people. But if that happens, you have to work with it. It's a part of running a business. I've got to say, it hardly ever happens. And I think we're running as a business now in the mid-60s with people, not age, numbers. We employ people from youngsters right the way up to one guy who's 77, and still doing what he does. But me, like the other shareholders, feel really privileged that we're given the opportunity with Rivervale. That was a business that I went for an interview with to get given a job to do 40 cars a year, and I love what it does, and I love what it delivers, and I love seeing the Trustpilot reviews, and I love seeing that people internally get what they want out of life, and show some progression. We've got to be able to show people progression. So I'm always looking at how I can change it and where I can move it, and keeping people fresh in the business and playing to their strengths.
Love that. And it's so interesting. Like you said, there's that. I think any business owner, whatever point that is, that running a business, especially nowadays, you get to this point, and all them things you just alluded to, all them elements that go, Brexit, cost of living crisis, COVID, all of them things. They're all challenges that we face, and every business has to. Some flourish through COVID, more struggled than probably flourished, but some flourished. But actually, I remember having Ryan Hill on here, and he was like, you get to a point as a business owner or a CEO or whatever that level that you're at, that you go, what's the choice here? Do we pack up and go home?
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, if that's right, that's off the table. That's not an option. No. So let's just, like you said, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, being creative and innovative, looking at ways of actually how do we progress and get through it? Because packing up and going home ain't an option. No. So let's just work the best solution. And like you said, what you've, over the longevity of that process of every different part that you've been at on that journey, and creating the culture and getting it to where you have now, and believing in the people. You mentioned earlier about rose-tinted glasses a bit. We're similar. I'm always an optimist, so you always look at things and go, actually, I believe it's going to be okay. Whatever happens, it's going to be okay. Let's work out the best way to make it okay. And you believe in that. And like you said, if you believe in you believe in the process, and you believe in the team that you've built around you, you're going to get through it, whatever that looks like. Yeah,
there's always challenges, isn't there? There'll be another challenge. There'll be another challenge. Same. It's the same challenge, a different day or a different challenge. It's going to be there. That you've got to overcome it, but and you can't do it on your own. Yeah. And as long as you can give people, a bit of support, encouragement. If I'm leading the team and I'm up on the roof, how would that inspire the rest of the team? So you've got to dig deep, look at it. My feeling is that every time there's an issue, there's normally another opportunity pops up as well. But that's just the way I am, I suppose.
That's brilliant. Well, look, I want to just talking to that. Obviously, I guess when I listen to people's stories, I always look at where you've been and where you are now, and what's still to come. But with all that sort of in mind, looking back over the journey and where you are now and in the future, how do you define success? What's success to you, and how would you define that?
Well, how do I? It's a tough question, really. Because again, you don't take anything for granted, really. What is success? Well, I want the business to continue. Of course, I do. I want the business to grow and flourish. I want to serve the business more in the community. I think that's really really important. The people within the business. If those people, we have a very low staff turnover rate. If those people keep coming back each day and giving their all, that's one way of defining success. We're looking, at different type of acquisitions to make the business model even stronger. If we get those over the line this year from a commercial sense, that'll be a big success, because it just bolsters the current business even more for not only for us as the shareholders, but for the people in it. And Rivervale has been around 40 years or whatever it is. I'd love to see it around another 40. I don't think I'll necessarily be around when it happens, Sam. But you know, we take it in bite-sized chunks, and if the Rivervale is still there in another 10 years, then we've been successful. It's not an easy time, and the industry is challenging. But I think I've got the team of people and the business strategy to be there in another 10 years. That'll be success.
Love that. And like you say, you look back over the journey, and I'm keen always, because I it's difficult for me, like that definition around success, what it looks like is people go from a financial point of view, sometimes they measure that. Listening to you talk about that, always keep relating back to the people. I've got the good people around me, and the people that come into work every day are happy. I'm growing the business and we're going along, I'm happy, and that's where that's success is not then going to be a £100 million business, maybe one day, who knows, but not measured on that. The measure of success, I guess, for me, not always to be defined by a financial,
not a monetary value.
Yeah. I think that's something, because there is an element, especially within the business community, that someone's success is defined, like as an individual, as a company, can be defined and measured in that metric. And I love to challenge that, because I do think fulfilment, contentment, success actually come from so many other elements. You mentioned there about doing more work in the community, and that will work towards the level of success that you would have achieved at Rivervale. I think that's
there are more ways of measuring success than just financial. You know, you know, as I said, I consider myself really privileged. I'm a council house kid from West London that was told nobody would employ him. So where my journey goes from here, Sam, who only knows? But I just know if I keep doing what I've done, and I keep sticking by the rules of you don't take anything for granted, you treat people how you like to be treated. You've got to have that entrepreneurial bit about you, you know. And we had a little bit online, you know, when there was a bit a post you put out about people and meditating. I've not gone, very difficult in words sometimes to get it across. I've gone, if people find that and it works for them, absolutely great. But for me, a lot of my best ideas have come from me having downtime away from the business. I'm still thinking of work because I have that passion for it, and that's what drives me on. But I'm not at work. And if you're in the heat of battle at work each day, when does your brain get a chance to come up with a fresh idea? When does your brain actually take a step back and go outside and look back in at it and go, what about doing that, or adding that, or changing that? So my downtime tends to be, you know, I can remember sat there one day looking out in the garden through the French doors, and my other half saying to me, you're not actually here today, are you? This was like on a Saturday afternoon or whatever. And it was, I can actually remember that was when I started thinking, I need to add this minibus division. So a Saturday afternoon, this has been playing on my mind, and I'll put it together and start working a plan out of what I've got to do that. In the heat of battle, I might not have ever got that chance to do that. So I don't really say I switch off. I love my football. I love a bit of motor racing. I enjoy walking with a dog and the family and the other half, and all those good things that come with it. You know, I've got daughters that work in the business. I love that. I've got other shareholders and directors have got their children in the business. Again, love that.
But do you like
where I end up?
Because I'm interested in just with that, like that, because again, the work-life balance thing. So one of the reasons I started with the meditation, because I find it really hard to switch. I do love the things I'm involved. I love running the businesses I do, but trying to be present in those moments, like you mentioned there about your wife going, you're not really here today. But being present in that moment at that time, I'm conscious of that. Are you able to? Is your mind maybe always on work because you love the business? You can tell, listening to you talk, you can tell the passion that you've got for it. You can tell that you love that business. You can tell that love the people, what you've created there, and what you've managed to achieve with all them things. So that's a passion, and it doesn't feel like work because you love it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But is there? Are you able to actually? I can switch off a little bit. Are you always constantly thinking around work or?
No, it's if you've got friends that you go out for a meal, we go out with friends. One of those guys is quite senior at Direct Line Group. The first thing he'll ask you is, "How's work?" Straight away you go out to try and switch off in the evening to have a curry. You're talking about work before you've even got anywhere, haven't you?
Yeah.
But yeah, I do switch off.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say there's a hard and fast rule to switching off.
No.
Love going to the cinema. If you go and see a film in the cinema, recently did the Avatar film, you're in there for 3 hours or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Whilst you're watching that, you're not thinking about work. I used to play a lot of squash and five-a-side football with Dodge, etc. When you're in a squash court, you don't think about work. Or playing football again, trying to keep up with Dodge, which is always very difficult. But you don't think about work.
Just crunch him.
If I could catch him, I would have done. But I also don't think that people should beat themselves up, because I think out of those things, sometimes it goes bing and it's a light bulb moment, and so it doesn't. Whatever works for that individual, isn't it? There isn't a hard and fast rule, is there?
You're so spot on, and actually the main thing taken from that is the actually not beating yourself up about it. I do. I think that's one of my issues, and the reason I do delve into it, and the reason I'm trying meditation and other bits not really working. I find it really difficult. I find it difficult to sit there, and I'm doing this process at the moment. I'm a believer in, if you're going to start something, you carry on and give it a go.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do it properly, I'll give it a go. So I'm doing this process, and nearly 30 days in, but I am sitting there and thinking, as soon as I sit there, close my eyes and trying to do the breathe, my mind's just wandering, and I think the whole meditation thing is trying to say that's okay to do that. But one of the big things I'm going, I need to work on my work-life balance. I've not got that right, and but actually I do love the things I do. I love the business. It's actually not beating myself up going, I love that maybe on a Sunday night sometimes, or early on a Monday morning when I'm up really early doing some bits for the podcast and getting it ready to go out Monday. I love it because I'm excited about it. So not to beat the work-life balance isn't just that's your work there. It's not like it used to be 9 to 5.
No,
it's your work, and then that's your life and your home stuff, and there's different. That has an impact on that. So actually, that's your. I think Rob Starr said it really well. He said that's life, and work's involved in that, and your own time and your fitness or whatever that looks like, and your time, family time, and they're all part of this bubble, and that's what makes it is. Doesn't mean that's got to be there, that's got to be there, and that's got to be there. Yeah,
in that we got people in the business that they also don't switch off. You'll get emails at 8, 9 o'clock at night, and they don't just send it to you to say, look, I was doing an email at 8, 9 o'clock at night. There's a reason why they do it. And they're very driven people. We try to make sure that people take. I'm the worst for it, but we try to make sure people take their holiday allocation and to try and get away. But even when they do, if something happens, they'll email you when they're away on holiday. And what do you do? Say to people that's wrong. If they're that passionate about it, that's that person. That's the makeup of that person. If you can find your downtime, whether it's reading a book or watching grand design or whatever it might be, that what inspires people, or helps people. And another time for me is I deliberately cut the grass, and I get a lot of pleasure out of cutting the grass. It's not like the Amex or anything like that. But I put my earphones in, and Dad has an influence in this. Dad was also quite a heavy rocker when he was a young fellow, and I said, he was 19 when I was born. So I grew up listening to Led Zeppelin and people like that. So I'll put my earphones in. I'll put Led Zeppelin's greatest hits in as I cut the grass. Now, if you turn it on loud enough, you don't think about work while you're trying to keep those straight lines and that Led Zeppelin pumping through, Sam. But there's times, and I just don't want people to think that there's it has to be. We're all different people, and we all re-energise and work and are passionate about what we do. The amount of business people I know are so passionate about what they do. They don't switch off. They're at breakfast meetings or do's at the Grand in the evening on the same day, aren't they? Some of these people. And they love it. So, why shouldn't they if that's what they enjoy?
You know what? I think that's the big takeaway for me, and it's got to be each individual, whatever works for you. There is no, and we can look at well-being and stuff like that is such a big thing. Especially you got that amount of staff, you've got to look after well-being of staff and that be mindful, I guess, around them
100%.
things. And they're really important, but realising that actually we are all individuals, and some will need a little bit more downtime, some can be on it more than others.
You can't in a modern world you can't disregard mental health. I come from a generation where it was get yourself up, brush yourself off and get back on with it again. Did I have any anxieties? I probably did go to school at one point or another because I'm going to get slaughtered to say I'm not going to get a job again or whatever it might have been, and you dust yourself off and you get on with it. But that doesn't mean that you don't take into account, it's a different world these days, and people have got different pressures and social media and everything else that goes along in it. But you've got to learn and adapt and grow as individuals to help those people get through whatever challenges they got. And again, as a business, I think we really handle that well with people within the business. You can't ignore it. Ignore it at your peril.
Mate, listen, it's been so fascinating, Change. We're sort of coming towards the end. So tell me just what does the future hold for you then? What's the future for Vince Pemberton?
Well, we're going to continue to develop and make Rivervale a stronger business. That's for sure. Look at different angles. As I said, we're touching on some different acquisitions. I get a lot of joy. I'll get a lot of joy out of that when it goes over the line, Sam. Where I'm going to be in another 5 years, 10 years, who knows? All I do know though is that I'm going to make the most out of every day in that journey, whether that is at home or driving the business on at work or supporting people. The door is always open. So where I'll be, I can't tell you. I'd love to still be the CEO of Rivervale Cars Limited because it's just such an honour and a privilege to be there, and I don't doubt that I won't be. But I can't. It's a tough question.
Mate. One thing I'll take from that, actually, the key there is that, and I use that cliche a lot, and I'll chuck it in there, but that actually enjoying each day on that journey, enjoying them, like listening to you talk actually, and through the challenges over the time, but I do get a real sense that you have enjoyed that whole of the journey, like, because it's obviously a passion for you, motorcars, the industry as a whole. Listening to you talk about it, looking at your posts that you put out on social media, whether it be about Capri or whatever it is, or about Rivervale, and you can tell there's that passion, and that is where true fulfilment and contentment comes from, I guess. I wouldn't say I like nice things in life, but I wouldn't say I'm a materialistic person. I've always my benchmark has been as long as I can provide for my family. Then that gives you a certain level of fulfilment, anyway, doesn't it? I've got lovely family around me, very supportive around me. So you get the fulfilment. But I have enjoyed the journey, and I just want to make Tommy Sopwith as an individual, if he's looking down on us, very proud of where we've gone to. A lot of changes, but we're on this journey that he still looks down and goes, it's been, the guys have done good. Mate, and I'm sure he is. So, look, we're going to finish always with our...
Can I though? Because something's really bothering me.
Go for it.
When Gavin Peacock's dad, and I said Roy Peacock, can I quickly look? So I'll make sure... I'd be insulting him. Let me just look.
Mate, you get on there. You get on
Sam,
there.
Because
Before we do our quick fire questions, let's find out.
I've got to cover it off because it's going to... Keith Peacock.
Keith Peacock.
Now, he's a legend.
Yeah.
Keith Peacock was the first ever football substitute that was allowed for tactical reasons and not injuries. So in the 70s or whatever, he was playing for Charlton Athletic. They had the 11 players and they had one substitute, the 12th man. And that 12th man was only ever used at that stage if there was injuries and bits. But it was the first time a tactical substitute was allowed during the game, and he was the first one.
Wow.
So he's a legend. So I'm really annoyed with myself that I didn't get Keith Peacock straight away.
Mate, we've got it in though. We've got it in. Don't worry, we've got it in. Well, look, let's finish. Quick fire questions. So I'll chuck these at you. One piece of advice do you give to your teenage self?
open the blinkers up a little bit. If you get criticism or you feel like life's against you, open them up and have a look at what opportunities there are actually out there. Don't run before you can walk. You know, be that program that can now be loaded. You know, and go for it. You know, don't be down. Don't beat yourself up. There will be an opportunity. Make the most of it.
Brilliant. You've mentioned quite a few people, but who if you name one person who's inspired you in your career and why?
I couldn't. When you said about this, I couldn't name one because they're at various stages in life. So you've got your dad, John Jeffrey, what a character. Yeah. Tommy Sopwith, unbelievable character. Yeah. And then you're looking at working closely with Neil Chapman over the last period with dealing with the MBO and bits, and you know the way that, as I said, this fella's coming up 68 and the effort he puts in. You know, they're really important people that have made a massive part of my change, had a big impact in my career and life. That's for sure.
Amazing. Can you recommend book or podcast to listeners that's had an impact on you?
Well, outside yours, get that.
Thank you, mate.
2 books. The Alan Sugar autobiography. You've got to read that. If you're in business or you lead people, you've got to read that, especially the bit about his marketing. And also Alex Ferguson's Leader. You know, as we've mentioned before when we've chatted about it, the synergy between football, sport and business, not just football and business. But you know, as I touched on, you know, David Beckham was a right winger. He'd have been no good as a left fullback. But Alex Ferguson knew his strengths and knew where to play him. Yeah. And if you've got people in your business, you'll know their strengths and you'll know where to play them. Yeah. And they're part of it, comes together as part of a team, and that's a successful formula. So anyone that hasn't read it, it's in business with a team of people, recommend they read it.
Brilliant. What is your one rule for living a fulfilled life?
Never take anything for granted. Never take it for granted.
Brilliant. Mate, listen, I'm so grateful for you coming on and giving up your time and coming and having a chat with me. Cause like I said, every time we have a beer and we have a chat, I go, mate, you've got to get you on. And we finally got here, and I'm so grateful for that. And it's been a brilliant episode and fascinating conversation. So I'm so grateful. And look, what a brilliant journey to have seen the whole Rivervale thing develop and where you are, where you've been and where you are now. And I wish it continued growth and success.
Yeah, it will continue to grow, that's for sure. We're not sitting back on our laurels. You know, thank you for asking me. I was flattered to be asked when I looked at some of your other guests previously that you've had on there, that some of those people that have had life challenges and done what they've done. So for you to ask me to come on and waffle about where I am with Rivervale and what we're all about, totally privileged. So thanks, Sam, for inviting us.
It's been gold. I can't wait to share the episode. Thanks again, mate. And that, as they say, is a wrap. This is the County Business Talks podcast, produced by H2 Productions.